You want me to put that on my tudger?
Harry's wife, Spotify, Markled. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The verb, markled, entered the Urban Dictionary. It means to abandon someone or something after they've contributed to your life in a meaningful way. Examples: wow, did Harry's wife really markle her father after he paid her college tuition? Did you know she markled her best friend after hearing the news about her? I can't believe she would markle the royal family after all the clothing, money and attention that she used them for. I would suggest actually, however, that there is a wider definition that's more applicable to someone or something being markled, which is basically that once it's had an interaction, or they've had an interaction with Harry's wife, they find out that it's all gone Pete Tong. It's all gone wrong. It's all turned to shit. As I've explained to you elsewhere, Harry's wife has the sadim touch, i.e. the Midas touch, in reverse. She does rather well out of things, for instance, getting the large Netflix contract. But what have they got in return? A boring beige 6-part docu-series which was roundly ridiculed and identified a variety of lies and revision of history within it. She is able to get the control and the fuel, etc., that she requires, but typical of a narcissist, others pay the price. And I would suggest that it would be far more appropriate to extend the definition of being markled to basically mean that you've been had, that something good has turned to shit, that you've suffered as a consequence of the interaction with her. And thus it would appear, by that definition, Spotify has been markled. The Telegraph, with an article by James Warrington, tells us, Spotify cuts 200 more jobs after Harry and Harry's wife's audio deal fails to pay off. Yes, Spotify splashed the money large in relation to the deal between them and Harry's wife, which, in truth, was really with Harry's wife, because Harry just made, I think, one cameo appearance in the Serena Williams episode. Beyond that, it was all Harry's wife talking fridge magnet platitudes, dressed in beige, talking beige, and attempting to settle scores in relation to all of the descriptions that have been used about her in her past by trying to suggest that somehow they were not applicable to her. RC Wipes, as it became known, was absolute crap. Many people listened because they wanted to hear the nonsense that she would spout and have it confirmed. Many people wanted to listen just for the sheer schadenfreude of listening to somebody who was completely out of their depth try and broadcast and talk about subjects which basically she had no real talent or investment in. Spotify have learned to their cost about spunking such a large amount of money on such a talentless individual. They were banking on, 1, people listening because of the fact of who she is by virtue of her infamy, which to an extent they got what they wanted, 2, that she actually did have something to deliver. Unfortunately for them, and they really ought to have known this, she didn't. She has nothing interesting to say. She has no interesting observations. She's not original. She's no pioneer. There are way more people that would be more deserving of a contract with Spotify who would be far more entertaining, far more interesting, far more insightful than her. They gambled, and they've been markled. And as a consequence of that, 200 people are going to lose their jobs. I'm sure they're delighted that the management at Spotify spunked so much money on this talentless individual so that they now have to go and look for a job elsewhere. Doubtless, of course, there will be other decisions that have contributed to this, but the amount of money that was spent on the contract with Harry's wife was significant. And its return, the Arsey Wipes series soon plummeted in the charts. After starting reasonably strongly, it plummeted because beyond an initial grudge listen, nobody was that interested in what she had to say, because so many people know that she has nothing to say. Typical of a narcissist of her sub-school, it's all about flapping the gums with nothing meaningful to be said. She thinks that she's hugely interesting. When she gave, for instance, one of the most boring speeches ever known in the history of ever last September at Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, she would have walked away from that podium, from that lectern, believing that everybody thought it was a brilliant speech because she thought it was a brilliant speech. Unfortunately, individuals such as her are also surrounded by the arse-lickers who say, "Darling, you were wonderful. It was a triumph." Listen to the people clapping and cheering, and of course, those people clapping are doing so politely because they've been brought up to respond that way, and the individuals who are cheering were clearly placed in the audience. Thus, unfortunately for someone like Harry's wife, it creates and adds to the existing delusion within which she functions to cause her to believe, yes, they do love me. What happens with individuals like Harry's wife is that as a consequence of her marrying a prince, she found herself, which she wanted, thrust into the limelight. Her narcissism then caused her to leverage this. This also means that there are a group of hangers-on, not necessarily narcissists themselves, but individuals who stand to benefit by being her advisor, her makeup artist, her stylist, if she has one still, her PR people. They see her as a cash cow, and therefore, by keeping her prominent, by getting her these gigs, by ensuring that she can make the speeches, etc., she's able to feed them in effect. They have a vested interest in keeping her in the public eye. If they were to look at it objectively, they would say, she shouldn't be in the public eye. She's boring, dull, has nothing interesting to say, but we're reliant upon her for a form of income, and therefore it's our job to keep her in the public eye. And thus what they do is they ensure that she gets the speeches and the appearances, but what they also do is that they feed her delusion by telling her that she was brilliant, that people adored the speech, and therefore they participate, to an extent, in her fantasy. They give her the validation that she seeks, both in terms of the provision of fuel, but also telling her that what she has created is amazing. They perpetuate her false reality. The Telegraph explains that Spotify will cut 200 jobs from its podcast business in its second round of redundancies this year, as the streaming giant continues to reel from its expensive bets on celebrity presenters such as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. The Swedish music company said it will make the cuts, equivalent to around 2% of its workforce, as a part of a reorganisation of its podcast business. It comes less than 5 months after Spotify laid off around 600 employees and parted ways with Dawn Ostrov, the executive oversaw its recent move into podcasting. The cuts are the latest sign that Spotify is failing to reap the benefits of its heavy investment in the popular audio format. In January, Chief Executive Danny Ek admitted that he got a little carried away with the spending binge as the company sank to a €430 million loss last year. Spotify has pumped billions of euros into podcasting in recent years, signing up stars including the Sussexes and Joe Rogan. But the Duchess's Arsey Wipes podcast series has struggled to make waves, while the Joe Rogan deal, worth a reported $200 million, has been beset with controversies after the host spread COVID vaccine misinformation and used a racial slur. Yes, but at least Joe Rogan's interesting and has interesting guests, and he knows how to interview people. At least he's not dull and beige and boring. Spotify also spent hundreds of millions of euros buying podcast studios Parcast and Gimlet as it looked to establish a leading position in the sector. But the company will now merge the two studios into a single operation as it scales back its focus on original programming. It then talks a bit more about the business side of things, but the fact is that the money that it paid to Harry's wife was wasted. And this has led to more jobs being lost. She's not the sole cause of this, but she is a cause, and it's just representative of the sadim touch that she has, whereby if you get Harry's wife involved with you, she'll get what she wants, but you will be left ruining and regretting your involvement, as undoubtedly Spotify will be after the disastrous showing of RC Wipes. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.